What is going on, everybody? Thank you for clicking on the video. Today, we're going to be talking about rookie wide receivers, top 20 tiers, rankings. You got it. Let me know what you think in the comments, but we're just going to jump right into it. Should probably mention before we get into it, this wide receiver class, just real briefly on the wide receiver class. It is very good at the top. There are some really good options at the top. There's some interesting options in the middle. And to be honest, the depth of the wide receivers aren't as good as I've seen in previous classes. It doesn't compare to last year's class, for example. I don't think it's as good as that. But let's just get right into this. And we'll start with tier 1. And I know what some of you are going to say. Seth, you're insane. You're a crazy person for putting Travis Hunter ahead of Tet McMillan in the early first round tier in tier 1 because Travis Hunter is going to play cornerback. Seth, he might play cornerback because he is really, really good at playing cornerback. He's a great wide receiver too, though, by the way. And if you missed it, you should go check out my Travis Hunter all 22 film breakdown where I highlight specific plays where I comped him to Justin Jefferson. He looks like that kind of a special athlete. It's why he's going to be a top 5 pick, if not a top 3 pick in the NFL draft, depending on how the quarterbacks shake out. And to me, if we're doing this evaluation right, he is the most talented wide receiver. If tomorrow Travis Hunter comes out and he says, I am going to play wide receiver, he is hands down the wide receiver 1 in this class. And even if he plays the majority of the time at wide receiver, I still think he's the wide receiver 1 in this class. I know I'm on an island with this, but I've dug into the film. I've compared these two players. To me, it's Travis Hunter, and I can't put him lower than Tet McMillan. I just can't at this point. And it's not to say that Tet McMillan's bad. Tet McMillan is really good, and he has 2 seasons where he put up over 1,300 receiving yards at Arizona. 10 touchdowns his sophomore year, 8 touchdowns in 2024. No season with lower than 8 touchdowns, and he's a bigger, more physical wide receiver that wins really, I think, really well in the short to intermediate game. I think he needs to develop in the long game a little bit more, but he can win there too. So this tier 1 of wide receivers is really strong. If you're at the top of the draft and you need a wide receiver, Tet McMillan's there. If you don't want to, I understand if you don't want to risk it with Travis Hunter, it's understandable. I get it. But to me, this top tier of wide receivers is really good. And you won't be disappointed if you take either Travis Hunter or Tet McMillan. Let's go down to tier 2. So this is another debate. Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka. I have Luther Burden ranked just ahead of Emeka Egbuka. And that is because I can't look away from what he did in 2023. In 2023, 1,200 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, and he looked so dynamic. And that Missouri offense was so much better a year ago than it was this year. I don't know what happened. Brady Cook didn't play nearly as good as he did. I don't know if the SEC just caught up to him with their scheme. I have no idea. And this season, Burden, 676 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. He did average 12.8 yards per attempt rushing the football. Luther Burden is a dynamic athlete. And when I was watching the tape, I think Luther Burden is riskier, but I think he has a higher upside than Emeka Egbuka. That's how I view it. I think Emeka Egbuka is really good. I think he has really good size. I think he's a really good route runner. But I keep coming back to Luther Burden and watching the contested catches and watching really just the dynamic plays, especially, in his sophomore season, that I think that there's a lot of upside there. And I like Emeka Egbuka. I'm going to have a lot of both of these guys if I'm drafting in the mid first round, which is where I have them in these tiers. But to me, it's Luther Burden. I'm going with the upside. Let's go down to tier 3 now. And there's only one player in tier 3, and that's Trey Harris, 5th year senior. So he's been around a little bit. He started at Louisiana Tech, transferred to Ole Miss, had his best season in year 5, which is always a little bit concerning. But the traits are there. The size is there. You know, he's got pretty good speed for his size. He's probably going to run in the 4.5s. Yes, his best season was this season, but he produced all the way back to 2022, where he caught 65 passes, 935 yards, averaged 14.4 yards per reception. And, you know, in 2023 as well, I mean, 54 catches, 985 yards, averaged 18.2 yards per reception, which that's the best mark of his career there. So again, it's not like he hasn't produced, you know, outside of this season. He's been steadily, consistently producing since his sophomore season in 2022. And now he's going to come into the league this season. He's a little bit older prospect, but I like the size. I like the traits. And I think he's got good athleticism for that size as well at 6'3", 210 pounds. Let's move on down to tier 4. This is the early second round pick. And let's talk about, or the early second round picks. And let's talk about Xavier Estrepo. I'm not sure why I added an extra Xavier Estrepo. I'm not sure why I added an extra syllable to his name, but I did. You know, I don't want this to be lazy, but he reminds me of this year's Ricky Pearsall. Back-to-back seasons of 1,000 receiving yards, had his best season in his 5th year senior, just like Ricky Pearsall did last year. And just the way he runs routes, how Miami used him, really feels like he's NFL ready. Feels like he's ready to go. And it feels like he's a player that the NFL is going to be a lot higher on than maybe some of us fantasy gamers will be. Just like Ricky Pearsall. I mean, Ricky Pearsall got drafted in the late first round, and I'm not saying Xavier Restrepo is going to get drafted in the late first round, but you just go watch him play and then watch Ricky Pearsall play. I think there's a lot of similarities there. And again, the college production's there, especially this season, averaging 16.3 yards per reception. That's by far and away the best mark of his career with Cam Ward in Miami. Let's move on down to tier 5 and Kyron Lacey. Now, Kyron Lacey's interesting because, again, he's a 5th year senior. This kind of production that we saw in his 5th year is more indicative of maybe we should be worried, because this season, 866 yards, the yards per reception mark did drop significantly from 2023, where he caught just 30 passes, 558 yards, 18.6 yards per reception. And in 2024, you know, you're talking 58 receptions, 866 yards, 9 touchdowns. But when you watch the tape, he looks pretty polished as a route runner. He looks like he runs a multitude of different routes. He looks good on film to me, which is why I have him in this tier. And I also like the fact that he's bigger. You know, he's 6'3", 212 pounds. And I think he's a relatively versatile wide receiver as well. I mean, I think he can play outside. I think you could move him in the slot as well. So again, interesting player there in Kyron Lacey. I'm going to dive deeper into the film. And if you haven't checked out my film breakdowns on this channel, you definitely should go check those out. They're under the playlist, all 22 film breakdowns, I believe it is. And now let's go down to tier number 6, where we have Ilik Ayumanor, who might be one of my favorite prospects in this class that's probably going to be drafted in the late second, maybe even the 3rd round of your rookie drafts. Jalen Royals is somebody I'm very intrigued by. Isaiah Bond has the best touchdown dance in all of college football. And then Jack Beck, who is kind of like a Xavier Restrepo light a little bit. But let's start with Alec Ayumanor, who had one of the best games that I saw a guy have against Travis Hunter at corner in the Stanford game. I think it was 2023. I'm pretty sure it was 2023. It might have been 2024. He's bigger. Alec Ayumanor is bigger. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. If you look at the 40-yard dash time, somewhere in the 4.4s. Like if he runs a 4.4 anything at that size, very, very impressive. And like I said, he wins a lot of contested catches at that size. And with that speed, I think his route running is pretty good. I think he's got a lot of the physical tools that you're going to look for in a wide receiver that could succeed at the NFL level. You do wonder if he relies a little bit too much on that physicality sometimes, but overall, I think he's a really, really good player. Very exciting. I'll have quite a bit of Alec Ayumanor, I feel like. And then Jalen Royals. Jalen Royals is another guy, very dynamic, very raw, but very dynamic. And from what I saw on tape, he looks the part. He looks like if he falls into the right system, it's going to be very system dependent for him. But if he falls into the right system, he could be really, really good. Jalen Royals in his time at Utah State had his best season during his sophomore year, which is something we like to see. 1,080 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns. And he only played 7 games in 2024, 55 receptions, 834 yards, 6 touchdowns. His season did end with a foot injury, so that's something to monitor. But it looks like he's going to be fine for the start of the NFL season for whichever team drafts. I'm assuming, he gets drafted high enough to make a difference right away on an NFL team. There's every chance in the world that he went to Utah State, maybe gets drafted a little bit lower, maybe he's fighting for a roster spot. But we have a situation where we have an early sophomore, I guess technically a junior year breakout, but it was his second year at Utah State where he broke out with over 1,000 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns. And if you watch the film, Utah State kind of used him in just about every which way you can possibly imagine, like end around, screens, short passes over the middle. He's a dynamic athlete that you can use in a multitude of ways that, he might not be as polished as you want as a route runner, but, I think there's a lot to work with there. And I really think, he's one of the players that I'm higher on. And then Isaiah Bond, I don't know where Texas finds these guys that are just speedsters and, they're a little bit smaller, but that gives them that frame that they can really book it. 5'11", 180 pounds. We're talking 4.3 speed, maybe high 4.2 speed, maybe. Again, I don't know if this is because a lot of people are just because of the school and because of the player comparison, they're going to jump to Xavier Worthy. I don't know if this guy is Xavier Worthy. I don't think he's as good as Xavier Worthy. He's not as polished as Xavier Worthy, in my opinion, but he's intriguing, and he's going to have that speed that teams are looking for. He's a transfer from Alabama. We haven't really seen a ton of production. His best season was as a sophomore at Alabama, 668 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. And, Texas really, was able to utilize him, not very much, but got some big plays on the ground, 4 rushing attempts, 98 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Also 532 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, and had the best yards per reception mark of his college career at 16.1, which would, it makes sense that number would be high. You would think it might even be a little bit higher just looking at his previous years of production at Alabama, but in the previous years, 12.9 in his freshman season and 13.9 in his sophomore season, the yards per reception. You'd think, maybe there should have been some bigger plays. Who knows? But yeah, that's still pretty good. And now let's talk about Jack Beck. Jack Beck is probably, I won't even say probably, he's 6'2", 207 pounds. If you squint hard enough, you can see maybe a little bit of Danny Amendola to his game. The one thing I will say is it was this season, and really this season alone, kind of a weird career. In his freshman season, 43 receptions, 489 yards, 3 touchdowns at LSU. Then it dropped off the next year at LSU with only 200 receiving yards and a touchdown. He transfers to TCU his junior season, plays in 8 games, 146 yards receiving. And then this year, his senior season, he really broke out. Best numbers of his career across the board, over 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, averaged 16.7 yards per reception. When you watch him play, he looks like a pretty clean prospect. He looks really good to me on tape, and he's bigger. He's got that size at 6'2", 207 pounds. He's probably not going to run. He's probably going to run somewhere in the 4.5s. Would be my guess. That's what a lot of people are projecting him to run. But he's one of these guys who's going to be interesting to watch at the Senior Bowl because he's got a Senior Bowl invite, and he's intriguing. So I got him here in tier 6, a late second round pick. So let's now get to tier 7, and this is going to be a big tier because these are all the wide receivers who are interesting to me. You got the Oregon wide receivers, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart. A lot of this stuff is going to be landing spot specific. So if these guys get a pretty good landing spot, they could move up. The Iowa State receivers, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, are intriguing, especially Jaden Higgins with that really big body. And he was very productive at Iowa State. Is only played 2 seasons there, but 983 yards, 6 touchdowns his junior season, 1,183 yards this season, 9 touchdowns. The yards per reception number was far lower this season, which I find interesting. And then his running mate in Iowa State, Jalen Noel, smaller wide receiver, more of the new age type player, very much like Zay Flowers-esque. I'm not comparing him to Zay Flowers, but the production was there in the Big 12, almost 1,200 receiving yards in his senior season. So a lot to like with Jalen Noel. And then Xavion Williams from TCU is interesting. I mean, just the way that TCU utilized him, sometimes even in the backfield. So that's a guy that's going to be on my radar. Theo Weiss from Missouri, had to throw him in here at the tail end. Patrick Bryant from Illinois, Ty Felton from Maryland, and then Torrey Holton, who I always want to say Torrey Horton, rather. I always want to say Torrey Holton for some reason. I always mess up his name, like Torrey Holton, like Tony Horton, or Torrey Horton, like Tony Horton from P90X. Colorado State. I saw a lot of drag routes. I don't know why they ran so many drag routes at Colorado State. Maybe I just didn't watch the right games. I don't know, but I'm very intrigued by the Iowa State wide receivers, especially Jaden Higgins. I thought about moving up into that tier 6. That's probably the only one that I really thought long and hard about, but those are my wide receiver rankings. Let me know what you think. Again, this top 20 it's very early days. So we're going to continue to dive in. We're going to continue to grind, and these rankings are going to get better and better and better as we get closer to the NFL draft and your rookie draft date, rookie draft season, as we get closer to it. So again, thank you for clicking on the video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, give me a like, subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. And until next time, be good, everybody, and we will see you later.